All right, now I've got to show you some really awesome text effects here inside Photoshop as well. I'm going to do this inside a brand new document. So I'm just going to hit Control N here on the Windows side or Command N on the Mac, and that'll bring up Photoshop's new document dialog box. Create a new document that is 5 inches wide by 5 inches in height. 300 for your resolution, 300 pixels per inch. Make sure your color mode is set to RGB and your background contents is set to white. Go ahead and click on OK. There we are. I'll hit the F key on my keyboard to go into full screen mode. There we are. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to fill the background with a gradient, and that will sort of play off of the effect that I'm going to apply to some of the text that we'll be creating here inside this document. So I'll start off by grabbing my gradient tool over in the toolbox. I'm going to click on my gradient swatch up on the options bar because I want to create a brand new gradient here. I'll grab this first color stop here down on the gradient ramp, down at the bottom, double click on them, and I've got some CMYK values that I want to use here. 90, 80, I'm just using tab by the way to go forwards, 0, and 04K. I'll click on OK. I'll double click on my center color stop, and my CMYK values are 100, 90, 30, and 20. Click on OK, and I will double click on my last color stop here, and my CMYK values for the last color stop are 100, 80, 25, and 10. Click on OK, perfect. I'll give this guy a name up in the name field. Text effect gradient, and I'll click on the new button. He of course gets added to my gradient preset. I'll click on OK. He gets loaded into the options bar. He's ready to go. I'm going to switch to a radial gradient type up on the options bar, and then I'm going to drag from the bottom right corner all the way up to the top left corner. Perfect. Okay, now I'm going to type in my text. I'll hit the T key on my keyboard. That switches me to the type tool inside Photoshop. I'm going to single click and type in some text. You can type in whatever you like. I'm going to type in the word cartoon. I'll hit Control A here, Command on the Mac, and go ahead and set a font for your text. You can use whatever font you like. I'm going to use a fairly thick font for this effect here. I'm going to use Cooper, which is kind of a cartoony font anyway. I'll go back to my Move tool inside the toolbox. Control T or Command T for the free transform. And I'll scale this guy out nice and big on my canvas, something like that. And of course, hit Enter to lock it in. All right, now we have our text. We're ready to start applying some effects to it. I'm going to create the majority of my effects using layer style. So over inside the Layers panel, I'm going to double click on my cartoon layer. That brings up my layer style dialog box. And I'm going to start things off inside the color overlay category. So I'll turn that guy on. Now, of course, that fills my text with a solid color there. I can see my cartoon text down on the canvas. I'm going to make sure my blend mode is set to normal and my opacity is set to 100%. I'm going to change my color, though. I'll single click on that little color swatch. That brings me into Photoshop's color picker window. And I'll go and set another CMYK color here. 0, 30, 100, and 0. Something like that. Looks great. What's interesting about a color overlay is, again, because it's a layer style, it's non-destructive. There's my original black fill behind the sort of mustard yellow that I just created here. Okay, let's go and set a few other styles. I'm going to go to Drop Shadow, turn that guy on. I'll set my blending mode to overlay. I'll drop my opacity down to about 50% or thereabouts. My angle is 120. Now I'll drop my distance to 0. I'll bring up my spread to about 35 or 40, somewhere in there. You can start to see my drop shadow in there. And I'll crank up my size. Watch what's going to happen here. Bring this up to about 50. There's my drop shadow right behind my text there. You can see that. Looks great. Another effect I love is Satin. I'm going to turn Satin on here. That gives sort of a satiny look to my letters. I'll set my Satin blending mode to overlay. And I'll set a color for my satin. I'm going to click on the little color swatch here, and here are my CMYK values. 70, 50, 0, and 0. Click on OK. There's my satin effect. It's a nice, soft effect. You can barely see it in there, but it is in there, definitely. I'll also bring up my opacity. By the way, you certainly don't have to use the settings I'm using. I'm throwing in some options that I've already tested out. I know they're going to work, but the great thing about layer styles is it's a lot of playing and a lot of fiddling around. So feel free to adjust and experiment and see what you can come up with on your own. Okay, now something else I want to do. I want to put an outline around my letters here, what Illustrator would call a stroke and what Photoshop's layer styles also calls a stroke. So when I turn this guy on, you can see there's a very thin black outline there. I'm going to crank up the size slider here, and sure enough, there is my stroke. Now, I'm going to move my layer style dialog box out of the way just a bit, and I'll zoom in here so you can see this effect a little bit better. Command plus there on the Mac or Control plus here on the Windows side. There we are. Okay, here are my stroke settings. I want it to set a stroke of about 5 pixels, or there and abouts. I'll make sure my blending mode is set to normal. My opacity is 100%. And I'm going to go and set a color for this guy. All right, here are my CMYK values for this guy. 40, 45, 100, and 15. There, kind of a dark tan color. So that's really giving me a neat effect there down on my canvas. Good stuff. What else can we do? Well, I'm going to set another effect here called Outer Glow. I'm going to go up to Outer Glow here inside the Layer Styles dialog box, turn this guy on, and he's going to give me sort of a glow effect on my text here. My blending mode is set to screen. I'll pull my opacity down just a little bit, maybe down to about 40 or 45 or somewhere in there. The great thing about Layer Styles, you don't have to be very precise. I'll go and set my color here. Click on my little color swatch. More CMYK values here for you. 20, 25, 0, and 0. I'll click on OK there. Now I'll come down to my spread and I'll crank that up to about 20. And I'll increase my size to about the same, about 20 as well. And there's my outer glow there. Looking great, looking awesome. Isn't that amazing? What I love about layer styles too, check this out. I'm going to click on OK. I could leave my text just like that. I could be happy with that, right? Of course I'm not. There's a lot more I want to do with this. But in just a few minutes, I've given my text this really, really awesome effect here. And what's really cool about all this is I still have a text layer. So I could hit the T key on my keyboard if I wanted to and come back and select all of this text and type in something else. Something like that, Photoshop, or I'll go back to cartoon. Something like that. That's what I love about this stuff. Okay, I'm going to go back into my layer style dialog box. I'll double click on my layer. Get my dialog box out of the way here so we can see the text below. Maybe position my canvas over just a little bit so we can see a little bit more. I want to create sort of an embossed effect inside the letters here. I think you're really going to like this one. A lot of people like this one, bevel and emboss. So I'm going to turn on bevel and emboss. Look at that. Isn't that awesome? Okay, so you can monkey with your bevel styles here. I'm going to leave the default here, inner bevel, but you can certainly try emboss if you like, or pillow emboss. You can have so much fun with this stuff. Anyway, like I say, I'm going to stick with inner bevel, and I'm going to crank up my depth. I want to wind up around 220%. There's 225. That's close enough. Size I'll bring up to about 10 pixels, and I'll adjust my soften as well. I'll bring that up to about 10 pixels as well. There, something like that. Isn't that awesome? So now we're really getting this cartoon sort of balloon effect happening on our text. Now, if you're not happy with any of these settings, you can always uncheck the layer style inside the dialog box, or you can go into the main part of the dialog box, adjust your sliders, adjust your settings, go nuts. You could apply more settings if you wanted to, inner glows and inner shadows, and you can try your gradient overlays if you like. I'm going to leave it at this for now. I'm going to click on OK because there's a few other effects I want to apply to my text here.